Okay, thank you very much. And Rich, thanks a lot for this invitation, and thanks everyone for being here at the top. I look forward.
We're gonna turn you into a YouTube star very soon.
Okay, cool.
Thanks everybody, and thanks to Alfonso. It's my pleasure to introduce Alfonso Gomberdella, who is a professor of management at Bocconi University. He earned his PhD in economics at Stanford. He is a fellow of the Strategic Management Society and a department editor at Management Science. Also served for about 8 years as co-editor of SMJ. He was past chair of the BPS division, now the STR division at the Academy of Management. He has over 20,000 Google Scholar citations, which means that Alfonso is worth approximately 4 Rich Macadocs at the going exchange rate on the market.
Well, I have a good friend of mine who says that the difference is between 0 citation and greater than 0. So everyone from in that ballpark is in the same group. So
that's nice. That's kind of you to say. Alfonso also is the winner of the Richard Nelson Award for Best Paper in Research Policy. Terrific. His research, as you know, studies technology strategy and the impact of innovation on its industry structure. So please join me in welcoming Alfonso Gomberdella. You don't get to hear the clapping here with the muted screens, but you get to see it at least. So thank you, Alfonso, for joining us. Well, Alfonso, I don't know if you've been watching any of these interviews on YouTube that I've been posting, but if you have, then you would know that I usually like to start these interviews by asking a question about, what got you into this career in the first place. Obviously, I have never heard a 10-year-old say, "Mommy, I want to be a strategy professor when I grow up." So I assume that most of us take an indirect pathway to this career, and in your case, I think it definitely looks like it's an indirect pathway because, well, first of all, you're an economist by training, and rather than a strategy researcher by training, and secondly, even before you were an economist, you studied music and played the flute. So there must be some kind of interesting story behind how you got involved in this crazy field. So what's a nice economist and musician doing in a crazy field like this?
Well, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I did watch some of the videos. Of course, I watched the one by Ashish, even though it was a mistake because I could predict exactly what he was going to say. So I should have watched others. But yes. So no, that's a very, very interesting question. Also because I never thought carefully about this question. So let me give you the background. I think that, and you're absolutely right. I came into strategy through a subsequent of incremental update and adjustments. That's exactly right. But to start the story, essentially the story is threefold. When I was in my teenage period, I was playing the flute. I was playing for a soccer team, and I was doing politics. And the last thing I was interested in is in studying. and so at that point, then it turns out that I figured out that to become a great flutist, the chances were incredibly small because only 1 into a large number can make it. For soccer playing, it's pretty much the same thing. And so I have to say that something that I always say, I was not good enough as a flutist. I was not good enough as a soccer player. I had to become a university student. So this is basically the way I think about it. And so my father, I have to say, who actually played an important role in my career, he told me, if you are interested in politics, you should do economics, because economics is a rigorous way of doing politics. And then because he was an engineer and he had gone to Silicon Valley, he said, and there is only one thing that you have to work on, which is technological innovation, and you have to go to Silicon Valley. And so basically, after a long story, I did get admission to Stanford. And there is where I started as an economist. But I have to say that Stanford at the time, and I went to Stanford because basically there was Nate Rosenberg, Paul David, and Tim Bresnan. And Nate Rosenberg and Paul David were economic historians. And Tim Bresnan was an IO economist with a very strong bent towards interest in phenomena and these kind of things. And the trio was basically a trio of people doing what today we call strategy. Essentially, they were interested in phenomena, they were interested in firms, they were interested in industry structure. They had, of course, a good technical background, and so they also taught me how to do things with data and things like that. But they were not the quintessential example of economists at the time or of today. So basically economists with little interest in phenomena. And so they were really, really strategy scholars. So it turns out that when I did my PhD, I got an offer from a business school in Italy. It was a very good offer. And so I decided to come back. And that at that time, the conversion was complete. Essentially, I was trained as an econ-strategy scholar. And particularly, I was trained in being interested in phenomena. And then I moved into a business school. And so that is what made me basically into the field of strategy.
Right. Okay. So you got this way moved in this direction first because you were interested in politics,
right?
Which led you to economics. Now, I see you're still pretty active politically. I noticed you published more than 20 op-ed articles. Most in Italian. I assume I can't read Italian, so I don't know what these articles are about. But I assume there's something politically related. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a very different way of being political than when I was a teenager. When I was a teenager, I was very ideological and very opinionated. And basically, I based all my statements on no facts whatsoever, but basically on what I felt. I mean, today, all these pieces basically try to do exactly the opposite. They try to tell people, look, there are facts that you have to take into account before you make your opinions. And so I have become a little bit more balanced now. And so many of these, I think you can call them political because I try to make suggestions that are of interest to society and things like that. But they are much more based on facts and logic than what I used to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, they say youth, youth is wasted on the young.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so that's an interesting story. So tell us maybe a little bit about your journey in your PhD program. Now, we have obviously a number of PhD students on the call here who are in the process of trying to find a dissertation topic. First of all, remind us what your specific dissertation topic was, and tell us maybe a little bit about how you found that topic.
So basically, my dissertation was on the pharmaceutical industry. And so this was the mid-1980s. So think of that period as a period in which the biotechnology revolution started basically in the 1970s. And so in the mid-1980s, we were in the period where there's lots of discussion about biotechnology as a new technological paradigm in the pharmaceutical industry, but not much work had been done in pharmaceuticals. Mm-hmm. So I was interested in high tech. And it's interesting because at that time, most of the people interested in high tech were mostly working in electronics. And I remember, again, Tim Bresnan, basically, I was talking to him and I said, I want to do a thesis on the computer industry. And he said, why don't you do pharmaceuticals? I said, because I want to do a high-tech industry. And then Tim said, look, I mean, look at the data on the R&D figures per sales of the different industries. And then I discovered that pharmaceuticals had the highest ratio of R&D to sales than all other industries. So I became convinced that that was a high-tech industry. And as a matter of fact, it was a great suggestion because everyone was studying computer, and he gave me very good advice in focusing on pharmaceuticals, and that is where I did my work. So basically, I was interested in working on technological innovation, again, because of my father's...
right, he said go to Silicon Valley.
Exactly. Actually, my father said, you should go to Silicon Valley and study technological innovation. And of course, I mean, at Stanford at the time, all the economic historians were studying that. So that was a great fit. But then in terms of finding the exact topic, so I wanted to do innovation. I tried a few things, but I think small advice by your advisors, in my case, really mattered. I think that the small advice by Tim and also quite a few advice by Nate and Paul were crucial to find a research topic. And
well, you know, it probably wasn't that bad for you geographically, although the big pharma companies tend to be headquartered in the East and Midwest, like in New Jersey and also here in Indiana. You know, a lot of the biotech, of course, started in San Francisco area, right? It started in the Bay Area, like Genentech. So it probably wasn't a bad choice.
Right. No, that's absolutely right. In any case, what is interesting is that one of the reasons I was also interested in the pharmaceutical industry and in the biotech revolution, it's because, and this is to give you a little bit of background, I mean, Nate Rosenberg was one of the key articles that he had written was this article about the machine tool industry in the United States. And essentially, Nate's point was what we later called markets for technology. So essentially, Nate said, look, everyone thinks that R&D and technology, it's something that is done by large firms. And he says, well, that's not exactly right, because there are many companies that actually can exploit vertical specialization and division of labor in the production of innovation. And he wrote this beautiful paper on the machine tool industry in America in the 19th century. So for me, biotech was super interesting because it was an example exactly of the changing paradigm, not only technologically, but also in terms of industry structure. Because then you saw this division of innovative labor between biotech companies and pharmaceutical firms. So my thesis was really on this division of labor. It was a sort of precursor of the market for technology story.
Right. So, so you've got this general topic of the division of labor between, for R&D and biotech as a setting, and the idea of markets for technologies. And I think, a lot of PhD students kind of get stuck at that stage. They have a topic, but they have trouble narrowing it down to a specific research question. And of course, to do a piece of research, you really need a question that you can answer. So how did you kind of narrow down that general topic to a specific research question to study?
No, that's a very good question. Okay, my sense is that here is the way I can think about this question. I think it's neither that you start with a very clear idea and a very clear framework, and then you say, I want to study the division of innovative labor, and here is the pharmaceutical industry. I hit exactly the right target. Neither you start by just trying a few things around and then eventually you find a topic. It's kind of in between. So in my case, I started by saying, I am interested in technological innovation. Then I read Nate's stuff and other related stuff. And I started to understand this idea of the division of labor in the capital good industry and so on and so forth. And then Tim Bresnan said, look at the pharmaceutical industry. And that is where I found the biotech companies. And then, you see, so it's a process of continuous back and forth. So what I would say in terms of advice, two tips. Number one is that you kind of have to have a framework, but you also have to know when you search in practice, but you also have to know that your framework can be changed by what you actually see. And the second big point I want to make, and this is something that I would really suggest, something that I always tell my PhD students is that reality has more imagination than imagination. So if you look at phenomena, you learn a lot. And you learn a lot of things that you can work on. Even in the paper I'm going to present today, you will see we have a theoretical framework. It's completely based on what we observed. The goal is to model exactly what we have observed. So my suggestion is that know the phenomena. I spent lots of time reading Business Weeks and all these kind of journals about pharmaceutical firms and so on and so forth. And you learn a lot of things that you can then theorize. So that would be my other suggestion. Have an initial framework, play around that framework, but look at phenomena and use the phenomena to inform your framework and vice versa.
Nice. So you wound up you basically let the phenomenon dictate your research question, right? So what was ultimately the research question that you wound up with in the dissertation?
The question was really the following. If you have a very strong, if you have a technological paradigm that is highly, quote unquote, scientific, that basically means that codifies the knowledge that you need to solve problems, the question is, would the division of labor be more likely? And the theoretical argument is exactly this. The theoretical argument is one of the reasons for integrating technological knowledge and R&D within large firms, it's precisely because of the lack of codification. So you cannot write contracts, you cannot identify clearly what you are doing. But as soon as you have this technological push, so that makes the knowledge more scientific, you can now identify the object. And so you can buy and sell the object, and you can even protect it through intellectual property. So the question was, does the scientification of technology lead to greater vertical division of labor?
I see, okay, which makes sense, right? So what were the biggest challenges that you faced as a doctoral student in executing this dissertation project? Was it simply, coming up with that framing, or was it something to do with data collection or data analysis or writing it up? What were the biggest challenges that you faced?
Okay, for one reason, I have to say that what made my story and dissertation easier, and I think this is true of many PhD students, I was in an environment with an incredible amount of spillovers. So you go and knock at Tim's door, you knock at Paul David's door, you knock at another door, you ask a question, and you get lots of steps ahead. And I noted this when I came back to Italy. When I came back to Italy, this is something I had completely underestimated. At the time, I did not have doors where to knock. So the big suggestion to PhD students is knock at the doors of your faculty. And let me give you a story, because some of the PhD students are kind of, how can I say, they are so polite that they don't do it. But let me give you the story. One of my best PhD students is Marco Giarratano, who is now the Dean of Research at IE in Madrid. And when Marco was my PhD student, he used to stand on my door and he would say, I need to talk to you. And I said, Marco, I have no time to talk to you. I will stand here till you have time. And so Marco stood in front of my door all the time. I was doing everything. And I remember that one day, I was in Pisa at the time, I had to go to Rome and by car. And I said, look, Marco, I don't have time now. I really have to rush to go to Rome by car and come back. And he said, I will come to you. I will come with you to Rome. And so we went together in the car, Marco and I, but we spent 3 hours to go, 3 hours to come back. He spent 6 hours with me chatting all the time. So my big suggestion to PhD students is abuse the time of your advisor. Stand in front of the door, and also talk with you guys. Talk amongst. I mean, you have talked to Ashish. I learned a lot from Ashish. I mean, just talking to your fellow graduate students is another way. So you are in an environment in which you have spillovers that you will probably not have at the same level. So my big suggestion is do that. And so to go through the challenges, I would say, of course, I had many challenges to overcome. I mean, moments of discomfort and so on and so forth. But I always realized that the way to overcome the challenges is to talk to people, to the right people. Mm-hmm. And so this is my big suggestion. Talk to your advisor, talk to your fellow graduate students, accept that they will tell you that what you have said is just completely stupid. One thing that Ashish and I used to tell each other is that we are very good friends because we can tell each other, you are an idiot. And you don't really, you know that you don't really mean it. And the other one does not take it personally. So, right. So I think you have to engage in that kind of thing and be fully free and comfortable in talking to people, even if you think it's a stupid idea. Just get in touch. We are in a business of producing knowledge by means of knowledge. I do think these spillovers are crucial.
So your advice to doctoral students is become a stalker.
Yes.
Stalking your advisor and follow them to the grocery store and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good. That will work at least until the judge issues the restraining order. So good.
Yeah, yeah. Let me put it in a slightly different way, which might be a little bit more acceptable. I would say that you are in an environment that is very rich, and you need to take advantage of it. And so do your best. Don't restrain from talking to people because this is going to be very helpful.
Very good. So let me shift gears now and maybe talk a little bit about some different stuff. So, you define your area of expertise as technology strategy, the markets for technology, right? That's I think a fair characterization. What do you think are the most important unanswered questions in that topic area? What do we not know yet about technology strategy and markets for technology that we really ought to know?
Of course, there are many things that you that you need to understand better. And also, let me say that as obvious as it may seem, I mean, again, phenomena evolve at a rate which is far higher than our ability to understand them.
Right.
So I think it's an endless race in which we are always losers. And so in that respect, I think the scarce resource is not to find problems, but actually to find solutions. Now, to be specific, and this is, let me actually broaden your question a little bit.
Okay. Feel free.
In the following sense, I really think that the strategy field, and this is really part of my more conscious move into the strategy field, or let me put it this way. I did move into strategy through, as I said, incremental movements, but it is also true that when I came into the strategy field, I find that this field is very, very interesting and exciting, precisely because it's very much grounded on phenomena, tries to understand phenomena. It's very eclectic, it's very heterogeneous, does not have one size fits all in terms of methods, models, and I think this is really, really very important. And I feel not only very comfortable, but I think this is the right way of doing things. So to give you a sense, I think that we are like artisans that need to perform a job. But when you look at the kind of job, sometimes you need to work with something, sometimes you need to work with something else, and so on and so forth. So I think in strategy, you need to be competent in different methods and approaches. You need to write qualitative stuff, quantitative stuff, maybe some formal modeling, and so on and so forth. So this is actually very important and useful. One thing that I think more generally, and this also relates to markets for technology, I think of two big areas in strategy. One, which is closer to my interests, I really think, and this comes from innovation, I really think that we do not have a very good understanding of how to manage decisions under uncertainty. I think we have a very good understanding of strategic management of operational decisions. So essentially, I know what to get, what is the best way to get there. I think we have good operational capabilities, good understanding of these processes. I think we have a terrible understanding of, I don't know what I want, but I need to do something. And we don't really understand that very well. And that is basically innovation. So innovation, or more generally, uncertainty. So there's lots of decisions you need to take with this uncertainty in mind, and we need to understand these processes better. The second big area, which I can cite very happily because it's completely unrelated to my field, it's really sustainability. I really think we need to understand much better what is the purpose of the firm, what is the firm doing, how can the, or even more basic question, can the firm actually be also a provider of social value, not just private value, and so on and so forth. Of course, there's lots of work on this, but I think that is another very, very important area where we need to understand things much, much better.
How does that last question overlap with technology strategy?
I think, I don't think there is an obvious and immediate overlap, other than saying that technological innovation is the way to solve a lot of problems, and so clearly also sustainability problems and related problems. But if you want to make the distinction and then understand how they complement each other, I really see the production of technological innovation as the way to basically move processes forward and to produce more outcomes, better outcomes, greater qualitative outcomes, and so on and so forth. I see the sustainability part more in, okay, now that we have developed this innovation, how do I distribute the benefits? And it's not just the pecuniary benefits, also the non-pecuniary benefits. For example, I now have machine learning or artificial intelligence. Of course, I can use it for very private reasons, or I can use that technological innovation to drive the firm in very special direction. I could use artificial intelligence to move it to more sustainability and social goals. So I think the links are, there's this separation, production versus distribution, if you want, but also then the complementarity between the two.
Okay, interesting. So how have your research interests have been shifting over your career? So you started out with the biotech, and obviously you've moved beyond biotech. Tell us a little bit about the journey you've gone through from that dissertation to whatever it is you're doing now.
I think it's been a movement very related diversification, in the sense that I think it's been a cumulative process, in the sense that I started with my thesis and basically the topic of technological innovation, markets for technology, pharmaceutical industry. And then as things moved forward, basically I discovered new topics related to what I was working on that then moved me through related diversification. This has, and again, this is for the PhD students, two implications. The first implication is what you do in your PhD is going to shape your entire life. I have seen, of course, there are cases in which people have diversified much more broadly than this. But on many occasions, I have seen people who start with their PhD and move exactly like I did through related diversifications. But what you did in the PhD was core. So to me, for example, this idea of vertical division of labor in the production and distribution of knowledge, it's still what interests me today. And the uncertainty part is related to this. And the other thing is that, again, you look at phenomena, it's a little bit going back to your earlier question. You look at phenomena and you see that phenomena change, even compared to what you understood earlier. And you try to accommodate the new phenomena, understand them, and this moves you naturally in that direction. So my suggestion, if you want to summarize to the PhD student, is It's important what you do in your PhD, but don't struggle to think, oh, now I have to find a great topic. I think as long as you find something interesting, it's going to shape you anyhow, and it's going to be a very good topic. And the second one is going back to my earlier point, look at the phenomena, because as they change, they will suggest to you very interesting directions where you could move your research. And this would naturally move you along a trajectory.
Good. So so we've been focusing on things, advice for doctoral students. For those of us who are a little further along in our careers, and are maybe at the stage now where we are mentoring younger scholars, doctoral students, and others. What's your observations about mentoring? Obviously, you've been a mentor to a number of doctoral students, and what does it? And you've certainly observed many other people mentoring their doctoral students and junior researchers. What do you think makes for a good mentor? What makes a good mentor? And do you have an example of someone you think of as a particularly good mentor, and what is it that they do that makes them a good mentor?
Yeah, no, I have. Let me start with the examples. Okay, my three mentors, and then I go straight to your question. My three mentors, Nate Rosenberg, Paul David, and Tim Bresnan, were excellent mentors for three completely different reasons.
Oh wow! Okay.
So Nate was great because he had such a clear way of thinking about simple problems. Nate had this characteristic. He would tell you an idea that would look incredibly simple, and you think, oh, this is a very trivial idea. And then you discover later on that it's actually very profound. And Nate has this ability to make things incredibly simple, both in the way he says and in the way he writes. Paul David he had really Aristotelian knowledge. He knew everything. So he was really, really knowledgeable in many, many dimensions. And he also had very original ideas. And his ability to enthusiasm in transmitting ideas to his student, it's really legendary. I have to give you one small episode. He invited me once in this restaurant, MacArthur's Park, for lunch at Stanford because he wanted to talk about research. And then we kept talking. We stayed throughout. We had dinner in the place. We stayed for the dinner because he was just talking and talking about this. And Tim Bresnan was very good because he helped me to always make very sharp implications and conclusions, and also good empirical analysis. So to broaden this into your question, I think a good mentor has to be someone who spends time with the students. Again, going back to the spillover part, you have to accept that the students need to talk to you. And so you have to talk to them, be patient, and also transmit this kind of enthusiasm for research, and most importantly for understanding phenomena. Because I think that the example is one very important. As you can see, I talk about my mentors, and I'm sure that everyone talks about his or her own mentors. So I think we play a very important role because people take us as examples. So being a good example, I think it's the best suggestion, best advice that I would have. And by good example, I mean you have to be passionate about research, teaching, you have to share ideas, you have to interact with students. Of course, you have to provide them with support. I think this is what makes a good mentor.
Excellent, excellent. And how about if I ask that same question about, what makes a good colleague? And do you have any examples of people you look to as being particularly good colleagues, and what do they do?
I think it's pretty much the same thing. I mean, in the sense, again, we are in a business in which, as I said, talking to each other, comparing what you're doing, discussing what you're doing is very important. So a good colleague is someone who actually is open to talk to you about this. One thing I have to say, let me make a more general example. One thing I'm very happy about, in my department at Bocconi, I think we have been able to create a very collegial atmosphere. For example, we have a lunchroom and people go there and have lunch together, talk about research, talk about things. There is in general a very collaborative atmosphere amongst junior faculty and also senior faculty. People are busy, so I don't think you can actually knock at everyone's door all the time. But there are moments in which we meet each other and there are opportunities to talk. So I think, again, creating a collegial atmosphere in which you talk, it's a good way of doing things. So, for example, this may be a small thing, but I don't think you should keep your door open all the time, because otherwise everyone comes into your office and you then go back home. But I think sometimes you have to leave your door open, and so that people have a sense that they can come and knock at your door. So that, I think, is what would make a good atmosphere amongst colleagues.
So you bring up the example of the culture at Bocconi. I will confess that when I was a doctoral student, I had never heard of Bocconi, and I think to be honest, Bocconi is a great success story. You've built up an incredibly great strategy group. In a place where basically a world-class strategy group, truly world-class strategy group. In a place where you wouldn't necessarily expect there to be a world-class strategy group. So what's the secret to your success, to Bocconi's success in building that kind of group?
Well, the secret, it's relatively simple. I mean, basically, it was a top-down plan. Bocconi had always been the best Italian institution. It was founded in 1902. And in 2000, the president of Bocconi, Mr. Mario Monti, decided that Bocconi had to become an international school. So from a strategy point of view, we are talking about strategic planning of the 1950s. So it was a complete top-down strategic planning story. And so he had this plan, and he said, we have to become an internationally renowned school. And so they put resources for hiring people with an international background, and so on and so forth. And I joined Bocconi as part of this plan. And then I think the success story was largely because a lot of the people who came into the department were Italians who had studied abroad with their PhD. So they brought the culture into Bocconi. And at the same time, there were some small changes that make a big difference in the rules. So one was, I think one of the key changes, it might seem very small and trivial. One of the key changes was when we decided, this was 2006, the decision was not my decision. The decision was we are not going to hire our PhD students anymore. And I remember the discussion, but we are going to lose excellent students. Yes, but we are also going to gain a lot of people from other places. And that was really crucial. The second big decision was when we decided to have criteria for hiring that were very much the criteria now at the international level. And again, this made a big difference. I think these elements created exactly what you have just said.
Okay, well that's good to know about that. Yeah. So let me see. So I guess my last question that I usually ask, I'm not sure if you have anything left to say about this topic because you've already said a lot about this topic. But the last question that I usually ask in these interviews is, what's your most important piece of advice for your own doctoral students? Now, I know you've already given us a lot of advice for doctoral students, but do you have something else that you share with your doctoral students that's important?
Well, let me reiterate the same point, because in Latin we say repetita juvant, repetition are beneficial. I think you are in a field that is super interesting, because remember, reality has more imagination than imagination. Start with phenomena, or at least take phenomena as a key important element of your research and understanding. So that is my first point. The second point is be eclectic in terms of methods, in terms of approaches. The third point is be passionate about research and link your research to teaching. Try to link research and teaching. And the fourth point is, you must know this, the equivalent of you who goes to industry would earn much more. So there is a compensating differential, but this compensating differential is made by non-pecuniary benefits. And so you have to value those non-pecuniary benefits. This would be my four tips. And the fifth one is don't be frustrated if your papers are rejected.
Yes.
Most of my papers have been rejected. So I remember, I will leave you with this story. Ashish and I were third-year graduate students. And so we had this idea. We wrote a paper. We wrote this paper and we sent it to the Journal of Industrial Economics. We were third-year graduate students. And at the time, you actually mail the papers. So we mailed the paper to the JIE. And the editor was Almarin Phillips. I still remember this. In 3 months' time, we got a letter in which he basically accepted the paper. So Ashish and I thought, oh, this is an easy business. And so after that paper, which was published in 1990, we got several rejections. Our next accepted paper was in 1994. So to give you a sense is, don't be fooled by initial successes. In most of the cases, it's a frustrating process, but ultimately, I think you get there.
Glenn McDonald at WashU tells almost exactly the same story about his early success, leading him to believe, oh, this is very easy, and then finding out it's not. And you're right that it does require very thick skin, because the modal outcome is rejection, and there's a lot of negative feedback that you've got to put up with. And
but I have to say one thing about reject. I have to say another good thing about the strategy field is that, my experience at SMJ and also my experience now, even though much more limited, management science, most of the reviewers do not have a nasty attitude. So they make their points openly and very clearly, but you may disagree with them, but you don't find the kind of reviews that I've seen in other fields, which really make you frustrated because they are really sometimes very personal or something like that. So that I think, and you should really make treasure of the reviews to update and modify the paper accordingly.
Yeah, so I'll echo a couple of your points. The nature of the strategy field being very diverse and eclectic, I think is a nice feature, because I was explaining this to someone the other day. No matter what skill set you bring, there's a place for you in this field, right? If you like to crunch numbers, there's a place for you in this field. If you like to read contracts, there's a place for you in this field. If you like to talk to people about their work, there's a place for you in this field. If you are like me and you like to create and solve mathematical puzzles, there's a place for you in this field, right? So there's just an incredible diversity of different skill sets that are accommodated in the strategy field, and you don't find that in many fields.
And actually, let me just very quickly say this, and I think the good reason about the reason why this is a very interesting field. It's because phenomena and reality do not come organized in disciplines. Discipline is just something that we created because, for one, we need to specialize to understand things better. And two, we need to promote people in academia. That's the other reason. So we create fields to say, I promote. But reality comes in a very unstructured and interdisciplinary way. And I think the strategy field is the field that best captures this richness of the phenomena that you see. This also comes with a slight shortcoming, which is this diversity sometimes also implies that the strategy research need to be tightened up a little bit and made a little bit more rigorous. The lack of a very clear method might have that negative implication. But again, it's a matter of balancing the two and try to make the strategy research better and better while at the same time preserving this richness.
By the way, let me squeeze in just one last question, because you mentioned your experience as an editor, which obviously is quite extensive. You've probably written, I'm going to guess, over 1,000 decision letters, probably more. What in your experience should doctoral students learn about the review process that will help them manage it more effectively?
I think one thing you want to know is this. Don't make the mistake. Okay, each and every paper you send to a journal, it must be the best paper ever you have ever written. Don't make the mistake of saying, oh, let me send this paper and then the reviewers will help me do things. This is, I would say, nearly 100% of the cases, it's a rejection. Because people don't do that. I mean, people don't see that. So you should really send the best possible paper that you have written. And by best possible paper, I mean, you need to present this paper, you need to discuss with papers, you need to have friendly reviewers. If you are a PhD student, yes, your advisor should read the papers carefully and so on and so forth. So when you send a paper, it has to be a very well structured and good paper. Because even if the paper is rejected in that case, it's easy to fix in any case, because the paper has already a lot of things that have been done. So that's my first tip. The second tip is when you are rejected, do revise the paper based on what the reviewers say. First, because they say things that are helpful. Second, because you are likely to find the same reviewers in another journals and they would not be happy if you don't do this kind of thing. So that I think is the second thing. If you get a revise and resubmit, do exactly what the reviewers and the editors tell you. Don't do other things. I was talking to a colleague today and she was telling me, oh, I am a reviewer of this paper. This paper made a point and now the paper came back. It's a completely different paper. So I will now judge the paper as if this was a new paper. This is really not a good thing to do. I mean, if the reviewers told you to do something, do exactly what the reviewers say. If you have other ideas, you can write another paper. So this would be my main tips. Always the best paper. Before you send it, present it everywhere, show it to people, and then if rejected, revise. If not rejected, do what people say. I have just to give a concrete sense of what I'm saying. When I write papers, I know the following thing. I present the papers many times, and then I understand that I can send the paper when I see that the comments are always the same and I can no longer fix them. So that means I have actually reached the equilibrium, you see? Because in each and every paper there are problems, but you have to be aware of them. And when you start seeing always the same comments on problems that you cannot solve, that is the moment in which you have to send the paper and acknowledge those problems as limitations. But as long as you see comments that regard points of the papers that you can fix, you should fix them.
I love that piece of advice. That's terrific. That's really great. That's perfect. Well, thank you very much for tolerating our celebrity talk show ritual and playing along with it. We really appreciate that. And that's great. So please join me in thanking Alfonso for his interview. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this conversation. It was very delightful.
Likewise.